Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Many familiar faces. It's great to see everybody here. Just out of curiosity, how many have been to a policy session before at CCTE? We have the diehards right here. And then who has been to SPAN, Spring Policy Action Network in Sacramento? Yes, awesome. Okay, that helps to know because then we know that we're not like starting from scratch to explain everything to everybody. I'm going to start by doing some framing about the policy committee and what we do and who we are. And then I'm going to turn it over to Nicole, who's going to talk about our survey. And then she'll turn it over to Pia, who will talk about our plan for SPAN. I'm Cynthia Grutzik. I'm the Dean of the Graduate College of Education at San Francisco State and one of the co-chairs of the policy committee for CCTE. Oh. Maybe I have it upside down. There we go. Well, we can turn it to the next slide, maybe. Oh. One more time. There we go. So this is in brief what we'll be doing today. We'll also hear from our Vice President for AACTE, Dr. Kimberly White-Smith, who will also introduce the CEO and President of AACTE, who, as you know, is here. And then we'll be discussing some advanced activities for SPAN. We like the opportunity to meet in fall because it helps us create some continuity across the year for this work. So a quick overview of the policy committee. I have a hunch that many of you on the policy committee are actually here in the room. So if you're on the policy committee, would you raise your hand? Great. We've been growing. And in fact, if you would like to join the policy committee, we encourage you to reach out to one of us. The charge of the policy committee, as it's laid out in the bylaws of CCTE, are that we develop recommendations regarding policies that affect teacher education, that we conduct workshops and conference sessions, which we have done and continue to do through SPAN, and that we carry out other tasks regarding policy issues. And you'll hear a little bit about that today. We listed all the members there. I hope you see your name up there. And again, if you'd like to join us, please contact one of us. We do have a calendar that we follow generally every year. And in early spring, we kind of wrap up the activities around the survey that we send out every year now that you'll hear about from Nicole, and look at that and see what information we have to bring to our legislative staffers and legislators. In March or April is SPAN. This year it's March 13th and 14th. If you'll remember, we moved it to a Monday, Tuesday, because we're trying to refine the times that we have to talk to people. And then in May and June, the policy committee meets again, and we follow up on some things that we did in SPAN. For the first time this year, we had a summer policy dialogue, which was really interesting for the policy committee and others. And then, of course, in the fall is this conference, and we build the continuity through these two sessions. One of the things that the policy committee and the policy co-chairs are part of is working with the board, the CCTE board, and working together on keeping track of what's going on out there and responding on behalf of the organization. So I want to invite President Bettina Shea to just come say a little bit about some of the work that they did as a board around policy issues this year.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. We're just passing the mic back and forth to each other today. So as the slide highlights, we've recently, and this is over the past couple of years, released multiple policy and position statements, we like to call them. Some of them have specific policy recommendations, but one of the things we always try to do in any position statement that we issue is not just have it be words, but have it be actionable, right? And so we have issued 4 statements recently, one on anti-Black racism, which happened in the wake of the George Floyd killing, one on anti-Asian American racism, anti-Asian violence, one on the recent mass shootings, which we wrote in response to the Uvalde shooting in the spring. And then most recently, a statement in support of the ethnic studies supplemental authorization and credential. And this is one way for us as a body to speak out on certain issues that we feel impact children and families and well-being and the humanization of folks. We're also in the process of issuing a statement on the situation in Iran and women's rights worldwide. And we are, thank you. And that was actually initiated by our board member, Kimia Magzi. So thank you so much, Kimia, for your advocacy in that way. And then we are also looking to issue a board statement in support. This just came up. Some of you may be familiar. This came up during this conference itself that Yorba Linda Placentia just adopted as a board resolution that says that you can't use any anti-racist framework. And so Cal State Fullerton has pulled all of their student teachers and placements from Placentia Yorba Linda. And we'd like to, we're looking as a board, to and as a Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, and issuing a statement of support and also encouraging other teacher credentialing programs to investigate that. But one of the things that we have learned in this process is how important it is for us as a board, as the CCTE board, to work closely with our policy committee. In order to inform the work that we do, we want to issue statements as one voice, and we want to use their expertise to inform the actions that we can advocate for in our next steps, because there are often policy implications on position statements. And so we are really working hard as an organization to improve our communication all around to membership, as a board, with our committees and expertise, and then also with our partners throughout the state that actually have structural power to do things, right? And so how do we actually use our organizational strength as the California Council on Teacher Education to impact issues of education and issues that implicate families, communities, and children? So look for some upcoming statements that we should be releasing in the next couple of months regarding those current issues. So thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, President Shea. One thing that we've learned from doing this work too is that teacher education falls in this interesting gap between K-12 policy and higher ed policy. And unless we show up and talk about it and tell stories about what teacher ed is about and what it takes to become a teacher and what we need to help people become a teacher, it's not on the radar typically. And so this has been a really interesting thing to do as we get into SPAN. So I think, do I have one more slide? Next slide, please. Now it's my honor to bring to the front Dr. Kimberly White-Smith, who is CCTE's Vice President for AACTE, to tell us what she does as Vice President of AACTE and what she's learned, and then also how this helps us be better at doing policy together. Is that what you're gonna say?
Sure.
Okay.
Hi again, everyone. So as the VP, that is the liaison to AACTE, I've also had the fortunate happenstance to have served in AACTE, starting from working on committees, then joining the board as a board member, and then moving on to the executive committee. And the one thing I want to say is, as for those of you who have just begun this journey or are mid-journey in your careers, aligning with AACTE with regards to thinking about intentionally developing yourself as a professional is really, really important. I learned so much serving on those committees with colleagues across the country, listening to how other states are advocating for themselves. One of the things that I learned about how to deal with my legislators, I learned by going out on visits with my colleagues from New York, who have a very organized and transparent way of having conversations with their legislators. And so for my professional development, aligning that with joining committees, learning more from people across other states, having that camaraderie, and then moving up in the organization with regards to my own service has definitely benefited me as a faculty member and then also as a higher ed leader, as a dean. So that's the one thing that I would like to share with you with regards to my development with regards to policy. My other role in California is I am the liaison to the commission. I'm a commissioner for CTC and I represent the AICCU institutions, so the independent, not-for-profit colleges and universities. And in that space, one of the things that I feel that I can leave with you all is it's really important as we begin to carve out the work of SPAN to collectively start to look at what the agendas on the CTC actually have. What are the things and how do they impact our work, right? We right now are working on teacher performance assessments, right? We right now are working on so many different things that impact our work on a regular basis. And there are organizations that intentionally come, they line themselves up in the queue to talk to commissioners and to tell their stories. And I think that that is a powerful lesson for us as a state to think about. I also, as a rep for AICCU on the commission, I feel it's my kind of like my responsibility to continue to inform people about the diversity, even within the private sector, because we tend to skew and think about public schools a lot. And we tend to forget that our private sector actually credentials 50% of the teachers in the state of California. We forget that 75% of our private independent not-for-profits are Hispanic serving institutions or emerging Hispanic institutions. We tend to forget that more than 50% of our students are first generation college going. And so one of the things I just try to leave our colleagues with is don't leave us out of the equation. Know that we too are partners with you and serve the same demographics and the same communities that you all do. So thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, my bad. Lynn, get going.
So I do want to just make a couple of points that are worth repeating. First, what Cynthia said about how teacher ed gets sliced and diced, if you will, in the government relations arena and in the media. I will tell you that reporters never know which reporter should talk to me, right? Is it the K-12 reporter? Is it the higher ed reporter? So part of the work that you all need to do on your campuses is to actually educate your government relations officers to create primacy for the work that you do. Oftentimes your GovRel people, that's the term we use, your GovRel people will forget that they have a college of education and a program of teacher education. So it's very important to continue to educate them and to point out, you know, a lot of times what government relations officers want to know is what's the impact of the work on the local community? What's the impact of the work inside the state of California? What's the impact? And so your capacity to tell your story so that they can lift up your message is incredibly important. So I wanted to make sure that you heard, number one, we do fall into the cracks. And number two, you have to really truly educate your government relations folks. And number three, there is strength, and you have always shown this as a CCTE. You include your university system, your state college system, your community college system, having all of you advocating together and having a singular voice. There are many things you may disagree on, but there are a lot of things I believe that you agree on, regardless of the sector that you represent. And so when you go to speak to your elected officials or commissioners, part of the strength of the work is when you have a set of talking points that you all agree on, because as you know, like anything else, you need to say it first, you need to say it second, you need to say it third, and you need to say it fourth. And then you say it a fifth time, because it takes that many times worth of repetition for your elected officials and your commissioners to hear the story. And you also know that your students are your best storytellers. And so, you know, in talking earlier in the day to your colleagues at San Bernardino, you know, when they came to our Washington week and they met with your senators and had students telling their story to your senators, they heard that story in a very different way. So we're happy to be of assistance at the national level. Certainly, we've done Day on the Hill at the federal level for many, 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 many years. So to the extent that you need to use AACTE as a resource, we're happy to do so. And who do I turn it over to next, Cynthia? Cynthia, excellent.
So this is good because I feel like it's starting to build on making sense of what it is that we do as CCTE in policy, telling our story from the standpoints that we all bring, and then together from our unified standpoint, as Bettina was describing. The Spring Policy Action Network is designed as a mini Day on the Hill. And a Day on the Hill is the day when all of us come together, figure out what we want to say, create our talking points using the survey, and then attend scheduled meetings with legislators or legislative staff. The last 2 years we've done it by Zoom, and our colleague Sarah Johnson, I don't know if she's in the room, Sarah, but she makes all of these appointments for us, and we go in small teams and bring the word, bring the message to staffers and legislators. And then afterwards debrief. What did we learn about how to do this? So that process of preparing our talking points and our focus, of doing the visits, and then debriefing. What we're playing around with this year in planning is, now that we have a Monday, Tuesday, what's the best way to do that? So that we have plenty of time to get our heads around our talking points and be really familiar, so we can say them 1, 2, 3, 4 times. But this is what we've been working towards and getting better at. Part of the goal of SPAN is to build institutional capacity, to build our own capacity to do this work. So with that, now I'm going to turn it over, I believe, to my colleague, Dr. Nicole Howard from University of Redlands. And if you'll switch to the next slide, please. Sure.
If I can hold it. Oh, it doesn't.
Touch.
This doesn't work.
Oh, it
Oh,
did.
maybe it did.
Or maybe.
Or somebody's helping me out. So
Yeah.
either way, so thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Dr. Kimberly Whitesmith and Dr. Lynn Gangone. And of course, Pia, thank you, because Pia's coming up next and she says all the wonderful things about all the things. So to get us there, though, I think it's important that I highlight a couple of things. One, you're probably asking, what are we saying to these legislators, right? What are we talking about? We are, to that end, looking to use the survey as a tool to find out more information about what's important to us from our positions at our various institutions. And we know that they need to hear our stories. They need to hear information from us. So many of you, I think, raised your hand earlier and said that you've been to SPAN before, so you're familiar with our process. So I won't spend a lot of time on these slides because we have an activity that will engage with one another in. So stick with us because we may have you move around a bit or get closer together. And so this year, this will be our 3rd annual survey that we do. And we are looking to, of course, tell our story, but we want to highlight some of the good work and the good things that we're doing. we want to shift our focus a bit. We often have called it silver linings, or we have other terms we've used. We want to now talk about promising practices. What we want to do is definitely tell them what we're doing. We'll create our surveys. Then the data that's collected is brought back to the real lab, the Race and Education Analytics Learning Lab that's at the University of Redlands. We'll analyze those data. We come back to our policy committee members who are here. They have an opportunity to raise new questions and maybe new recommendations that they can offer to us for how we may go back in and analyze those data differently. From there, we develop talking points, and those talking points are what we use to lead our conversation with the legislators and with our legislative staffers. Okay, and so I mentioned surveys. So we've again done 3 surveys so far. I said this is our 3rd annual survey. Our first year of doing the survey, we actually did 2. So you have the survey on anti-racist education, the survey on distance learning, and then we did the survey on educators' needs. Each of the surveys resulted in either a brief or a report of some sort. And so this is the first brief that we produced, and that's rising from the pandemic. And this one was focused on the anti-racist, the data that we collected. And what we did learn is that many of our educators in the classrooms were emerging in this area. So still beginning to understand more about what it means. Hence the theme for our conference this year, really talking more about what it means to be an anti-racist educator. And then the next brief that came out, thank you. How a year of COVID-19 prepared us for the future. These briefs are available on our University of Redlands Real Labs website. I'm happy to share that link if you want to read the full brief. Now, this is the same process we'll engage in this year. We're hoping to produce a brief after we collect and analyze the data. And so on our next slide, this is where we will do the survey activity a little later. So we'll have a chance to look at the preliminary questions that have been developed based upon feedback from many of you already. So we'll look at that today. But before we do that, we also have been thinking about how we can bridge a connection between this conference here, the fall conference, and spring. And the theme for SPAN is the Spring Policy Action Network, right? It's about policy. But it's important for us to think about our research theme and how we can maybe perhaps enhance it in a way that has us to think about what we mean by policy in our practice, what we mean by policy in education. And sometimes we have experienced that the call itself can be a little too broad. And so some people don't submit for SPAN in spring. So we want your feedback. We want to hear from you on ways in which we can bridge the theme, bridge the connections between this conference and SPAN. So if you would be so willing to talk with one another at your tables, feel free to turn around and join another table. We have the link at the last bullet there. That is the link to the actual form where we'll collect your ideas about the theme. And I'll just say the QR code takes you to the same place, so feel free to use that as well. And it's just one quick question on the survey. We're not asking for much, just for your ideas around a theme for the research call itself. One example, or one thing that we do want you to think about is the powerful learning that has taken place. So you may have been in an informal session, dinner even, where some conversations emerged based upon what transpired during the keynote. Feel free to think about that and how that can inform the theme. Is it working for everybody? I grant permission. Okay, so once I go back to my seat, I'll go ahead and update that and I'll give you the cue to refresh. Sorry, this is what happens when you have wonderful university security systems. Yes, so if you can begin talking with your groups, we're going to take about 5 to 6 minutes for this activity. So if you want to start talking now, I'll refresh the link where you can drop your ideas. I'll give the signal that that's ready to go. Okay, the QR code and the link should now be accessible. Thank you for your patience. Okay, as you're wrapping up and then of course, refreshing your screen so that you can enter in your ideas. I just wanted to share one. So if your table has discussed ideas, but you're trying to formulate sort of what we're asking, Dr. Kimberly Whitesmith offered one example that we'd like to share. It is creating culturally sustaining classrooms and communities, why do policymakers need to know? So that's an example of what we're speaking to when you think about what we would integrate into the research call for SPAN 2023. So we'll give about 30 seconds to enter in your idea into the form. If you want to still think about it as you leave this space, we'll leave this form open for you to enter in your ideas. I'll wait a second to make sure everyone has it. Yes. Okay. All right, so now we want to talk a bit about the road to SPAN and what our next ask will be of each of you.
Nicole, you can't hear me probably.
And so our next ask will be, and this is our timeline, our next ask is for your help with disseminating the survey. So once the survey is ready to go out, we'll have IRB approval, of course, but before we do that, as you can see here, we will get a draft out to membership for your input. So you'll have a link later today where you'll be able to comment on a Google Doc if you have ideas around questions that should be added or questions that can be or should be removed. We will then take those feedback back to the real lab. The real lab will then integrate that into the Qualtrics survey. It goes to IRB. We do get IRB approval so that you can send it out to your candidates in your programs, as well as people in your community, your in-service, your current teachers that are in classrooms or administrators. Depending on how we land with the final survey, once we have IRB approval, you'll be able to share it with those potential participants. Then, you want to go back one slide? The QR code? Absolutely. No problem. And so then I'll just use my notes from here. Then on November 30th, we'll send out links to all of you. We'll ask you to send out those surveys to promote and to share with your community colleagues. The survey will close on December 16th. Now, okay. Pia says, yes, it closes on December 16th. December 16th is when the survey will close. Once we close the survey, the real lab will conduct the final analysis on the survey. That happens in January. End of January, the policy committee then reviews the analysis and they create the talking points. So this is when some have asked the question, what do we say to the legislators and staffers? That's when the committee members have a chance to work together to create those talking points. And then the next thing that we'll do in February is we'll reach out to the policymakers about the survey data, and we offer an opportunity for them to learn more about SPAN. And then we do meet at SPAN with the legislators and staffers. There is an opportunity. I know some people have asked recently, is there an opportunity for me to work closely with other committee members who have done this work before, so that I'm comfortable when it comes time for me to talk with the staffer or to talk with the legislator? Yes, you will have that opportunity. We try to build that space in during the SPAN conference where we get into groups with those who you might be partnered with as you go in and talk with the legislative staffers, and you have a chance to see the talking points and review them. So we send them out ahead of SPAN But if by chance you don't actually see them until you get to SPAN, you will have someone more than likely in a group that you're working with who will be familiar with it, with those talking points, because they will have been at the meetings leading up to that moment. So I just wanted to mention that for those of you who might feel like I'm kind of new to this policy conversation with legislators, we do try to build in opportunities for you to become more comfortable as you engage in that experience. So to that end, I am going to pass over to Pia Wong, who is now going to talk with us about Assembly Higher Education Committee. Thank you.
Now I get to have this great experience.
It works.
So I'm so fortunate that I get to work with these two women. So thank you so much. We've been like this force with grand visions about making changes to policy in California for like 5 years now, I think. So I just want to recognize this wonderful trio and then all of the amazing work and all of the new members that we've gotten on the policy committee. Thank you so much. We feel like you're joining the policy committee as sort of a vote of confidence in this vision, which is still emerging, I must admit. And so I also want to recognize Yesenia Jorgensen, who is part of the SPAN Planning Committee, and then Sarah Johnson, who's also part of the SPAN Planning Committee, and then just does this amazing work scheduling the visits. So a couple of things about the visits. So I wanted to say one more thing about sort of milestones. So we have a milestone, which is a number of you have asked to be moved from the policy conversations with policymakers 101 into the conversations with policymakers 201, which we think is really exciting. It means people are getting more comfortable with this idea of being part of the policy dialogue and influencing policy at the state level. So super exciting, and we're busy working on policy making or conversations with policymakers 201, and it will involve a little bit of what Nicole just talked about. This timeline's pretty tight. It's a pretty aggressive timeline for people who have full-time day jobs. So just, advance thanks to the policy committee. You're going to be real busy in January and February. And then just thanks to the entire CCTE membership that we sort of enlist to get this survey out the door when it's finalized. So these are slides I spent a lot of time on, and then all of the information here will become irrelevant on November 9th because there's an election. And so probably many of these members are going to change, but whatever, that's fine. I wanted to just put the different education committee membership slides up here. I'm hoping, I can barely read them. You probably can't read them either, but we'll have the slides available for you. But I wanted to just highlight, like, you may have a representative who is on one of these committees. And so we may say to particularly policy committee members, hey, when we get the talking points out and we know what's happening with SPAN, why don't you call your legislator's office and say, I know you're on this committee. I'm going to be in Sacramento. I am affiliated with Cal Council, and we'd love for you to, tell your staffer to sign you up for one of our talking sessions. I'm not going to read them out to you all because that would be sort of boring, but you'll get the slides on the CCTE website. Do take a look and see if you have a member that represents you on one of these committees, and think about either, again, inviting them to engage with us at SPAN, or even giving them an advance warning when they're back in town in their district. So the assembly, and this is the committee listings speak to Cynthia's point. So we'll put 4 committees up here, and you can see how they sort of span 2 different worlds. So we have the Assembly Education Committee. Our longtime SPAN advisor is Chelsea Kelly, and she's one of the principal consultants to the Assembly Education Committee. She helps us think about things to put in the survey. So there's a little bit of her influence in the draft survey questions. These are things that she's curious about. And then the committee itself has a number of longtime members, Patrick O'Donnell, but I think he's not going to be there anymore after this election. I think he's termed out, nothing negative. And then a range of different folks sort of representing different parts of the state, and hopefully part of your part of the state too. The Assembly Higher Education Committee. So again, our feet in 2 different worlds. This is a long, large committee with representation, again, across the state. And Kevin Powers is the senior consultant for that committee. And sometimes he also comes to SPAN and talks to us about what's happening with his committee. Anybody who can actually see the information on the slide? See one of your representatives? Woohoo! Okay, you wrote that person's name down? Okay, perfect. Then we have the Senate Education Committee. That's chaired by Connie Leyva, who's been a longtime champion of a lot of good legislation in our two realms, PK through 12, and then teacher education. Again, long list of folks. She's okay. Their website is not updated as of 2 days ago. I just want to say. And the chief consultant for the Senate Education Committee is Lynn Lorber, and sometimes she also comes and speaks to us. And she's also done separate sessions for the California Education Deans at the Capitol. And I think I said 4 committees, but I don't think there's a fourth. The fourth committee would be the Budget Committee, which is sort of where all the sausage gets made. So now we're going to experiment with the QR code again. And our timeline is that this draft of the survey is open to commenting from you all for a very short window. Our apologies. So from today until tomorrow. No, I'm just kidding. From today until the end of the day on Monday. We're going to take all, and we're going to give you time right now so you can just go in and sort of make some changes. Now we're trying to focus, as Nicole said, on sort of bright spots. We'd like to, but bright spots that are focused particularly on connecting with kids and on social justice issues. So you'll see that framework in the draft surveys. We really would like to go into these discussions with policymakers, talking about what teachers, in-service educators and pre-service educators are doing to make a difference in the lives of children, particularly those who are the most marginalized. And we think that's a strategy to both bolster the efforts that they have taken in the last couple of years to advance and sometimes, retreat, but advance a social justice agenda. And we also feel like it's important to really highlight good work that's being done out in the field. So sometimes you can do a survey and it sort of uplifts like different kinds of problems. And we've done surveys like that. And I think this time we really want to focus on just the amazing work that educators are doing to keep those funds coming and to sort of encourage the legislators, sort of give them a sense of what their legislation over the past couple of years has actually rendered out in classrooms and communities. So I think this is our last slide. Go ahead and access the survey. I think that you will have commenter status, I believe. And just take a look at, what's there and add questions that you think should be in the surveys. There's 3 different audiences. There's K-12 or pre-K through 12 practitioners of all different kinds of credential, holding all different kinds of credentials. Then there's pre-service candidates from all of our different programs. And then there's faculty. Please, if you are not in a teacher education program, put that hat on and really help us make the language feel more inclusive for the counseling education students or the school psychology students or the special education teachers. It's definitely not there yet, but we didn't want you to just open up a QR code with a blank screen. So we thought we'd get going with a few questions. Juliet, did you have a question? Oh, yeah, well then, go ahead, edit like crazy. I don't think so. I think that's fine. Just put your questions right in there. So any observations, any comments for the good over the order? So 10 minutes till this session ends. We would love it if you all could stay and complete the first activity and also begin to look at the survey since the window for making comments is so short and closes at 5 o'clock on Monday. And now Bettina has some words. Thanks, everybody. See you in Sacramento in March.
So just thanks again to the work of Dr. Howard and Dr. Gritzik and Dr. Wong, Pia, Nicole, Cynthia, just they've done an outstanding job with the policy committee and really making us or helping us to develop more of our voice in Sacramento. I know that we're a little small, but some of you who have been tweeting are in the room. And so I'm going to do a mini version of the raffle now. And Terrell, can you do me a favor? Do you have a paper and pen? Okay. Can you just take notes on who wins? Because I said winners don't have to be present. So yes, ma'am. Okay, so for those who don't tweet, so I noticed the number of tweeters was very not so large. So I am actually I'm actually modifying the raffle a little bit, and we're actually going to give away 2 copies of Textured Teaching, and then and then if you come to the poster session tonight, for each poster that you visit and you talk to somebody, the poster person will give you a little slip of paper, and you can enter that slip of paper into these names with the tweeters. So the tweeters, you will not lose your eligibility, but you will then be entered to the poster session, and then the poster people will also be added to that. And then we'll have another drawing at the poster session. And at that time, there will be the grand prize. There will be 2 more copies of Textured Teaching signed by Lorena, and the grand prize of a free CCTE conference registration. So if you're not a tweeter, come for the wine, cheese, crackers, poster, non-alcoholic options, popcorn tonight, and you can still win. Okay. Okay, deal. All right, friends. So I need somebody to help me draw. Pia, thank you. All right, so our esteemed policy co-chair, Pia Wong, is going to help me draw. And we're the first 2, we're going to do mass. So we'll do least costly to most costly. And I don't know if these people are virtual or in person. Oh, I know she's here. She's actually in the back sitting with ice on her knee, but Reina Garcia Ramos, she wins our first match. So we'll take this to her afterwards. She had an unfortunate accident, but she's fine. She's okay. She told me she's tough. She's got it. And we got her ice because the Konakai staff is wonderful. Okay, and then Rangel Zarate wins our second mask, and I know he's still around, but he may not be in this session. And he is our home scholar, so we're very excited about that. We will make sure that he gets this. So Reina and Rangel. Okay, so our third winner for a copy of Textured Teaching, I think is in the room, Bree Evans Santiago. You win, girl. You win. So come get your book from me after, my friend. Congratulations. And our last winner, I'm so happy because some people have like 7 names in here, and I'm like, oh, one person's going to win all the things. Okay, and then Kia Darling Hammond wins the second copy of the book, and I know she's friends with Bree, so we're going to be okay. We're going to get her a copy. All right, so thank you all so much. Come back to the poster session. We have lots of fun food and alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages to get your appetites wet for dinner tonight, and then you see great research, people, and then you can win the grand prize and more copies of Lorena's book. So thank you all so much. Next are the SIG sessions, and there are 4 SIGs meeting. Please refer to your program and you'll see what rooms the SIGs are meeting in. And then at from 6 to 7:30, we'll have this last wall open, and we'll have 3 big ballrooms worth of research, posters, wine, cheese, etc. So we'll see you all back here together at 6 p.m. Thank you.